Okay, so let's go ahead and make our files before we can begin. I've made the basic HTML file, nothing crazy. We've got, our basic boilerplate, and then some text, or an H1 rather, and then a UL that just explains the commands. Again, not necessary, but just a reminder to us, and I guess hypothetical users that probably will never exist, of how the app works. So I've got that done. Now I'm going to make a file. I'll call this maybe todos.js, and I'll include a script. And I'm going to do source equals todos.js. Okay, there we are. So this should include my script. Let's make sure it works. If I put maybe an alert in here, I always just like to, test out that connection. So now I'm going to head over to my browser. I have the file open. I'm just going to refresh, and we get the alerts. Okay, good news. So now we basically need to implement everything. So why don't we start with a basic game loop, if you will, this while loop that continues to ask over and over and over, just to jog your memory, right? This is the solution. What would you like to do? It's just going to keep asking me. Let's just keep entering gibberish. And then the one thing it knows is quit. So if I enter quit, if that's the case, we print out you quit the app and we stop bothering you. We stop asking. So to do that, basically we'll want some form of a while loop, right? And while something is not equal to quit. Now, what is that something going to be? Well, let's start by asking a user to enter, let's prompt them. What would you like to do? And then save that to a variable. And I'm going to use let, not const, because I will be updating this variable. So let, what should we, maybe just input? And then here we'll say while input is not equal to quit, we will just continuously ask you. So I'm going to say, input equals prompt. What would you like to do? So in other words, at the very beginning, ask one time, what would they like to do? Now, if they happen to type quit as the first thing, then we're just done. But if they enter anything else, ask them again and again and again and again. And then at the end, let's do something like, okay, quit the app or something. I don't remember what we actually printed out over here. What was it? You quit the app. All right, close enough. So let's see what happens. What would you like to do? Just typing anything. But as soon as I type quit, hopefully, should open the console. There we are. We see quit the app. Okay, next up, let's quickly check to see if input is, basically we want to quit if you type the letter Q. So how would I do that? Well, with what we have right here, while input is not equal to quit, the string, I could add on another condition, but what would it be? Basically, I want to keep running this code while you have not entered quit and you have not entered Q. So that can be confusing because we're doing a while loop with not equality, right? This loop runs as long as you don't enter this. Some people might think, oh, we want or, while your input is not quit or your input is not Q, but that's not the case. We only want this loop to run. This is the, continuing to bother you and ask you questions. We want to keep asking you questions as long as your previous input was not quit and it was also not Q. If it was either one, then we're done. So I'm going to do and input is not equal to Q. Okay, so let's see if that works. Refresh the page. Let's type Q, and we're done. Try it one more time. I type quit. Oh boy. This is what happens when I have a mic in my face and I can't see the keyboard. There we go. Okay, quit the app. So next up, let's implement the adding a to-do and listing a to-do feature. So first, we need a place to store the to-dos, and I'm going to make a to-dos list, specifically an array. So I'm going to use const, as we've talked about. It's most common with arrays. So const to-dos equals empty array. Or to help us out, let's just put something in there to begin with. How about collect eggs? And let's just do one more. Collect chicken eggs and how about clean cat litter box? So just litter box. Put whatever you want in here, obviously. Okay, so now that we have 2 to-dos in there, why don't we focus on listing the to-dos? And remember how this is supposed to work. We list the to-dos. If I just list the one, the default, we have this console.log, that's easy. But then we also have the index that we're printing out because we use that when we delete something. So it's nice to show the user that index. So let's implement list. Let's add some logic in here so that when a user types list as their input, so that would be in the loop, instead of just asking them, what would you like to do? First, we're going to check, well, what if their input was exactly equal to list? Also, you know what? This is sort of a silly thing to point out, but I'm realizing I'm being sloppy with mixing double and single quotes. Personally, I like to use single quotes, or at least I need to be consistent. I don't have to, but style-wise, I like it. So I'm just going to quickly change that. Okay, so where was I? Yes, if the input that a user types is equal to the string list, what do we want to do? Well, why don't we just start by recognizing it? Console.logging, maybe just the stars to begin with. So just a list of stars, a string of asterisks, just like that. So let's just make sure we can see that if I do type list. So I'll type something that's not list. I'll type list. Okay. And then I'll quit. So now what we actually want to do is print out each to-do from the to-dos array. But I also want the index. So a for of loop, unfortunately, it's not going to work for me. What I'm going to use instead is a for loop, a regular old for loop. So how do we loop over the array? For, I'll use I, starting at index 0, while it's less than to-dos.length, add one more to I each time. So we start at index 0, and then we keep looping, incrementing I until we hit the highest index in the array, and we stop before we hit the length of the array, because remember, this array is a length of 2, but the highest index is 1, 0, 1. Okay, so then we'll print out a string, and the easiest option, I think, is a string template literal. So we'll show I, and then a colon, and then the actual to-do. Well, how do I get the to-do? I use the index, to-dos, square bracket, I. Just a quick note, later on we'll see another option for how we could achieve this, where we want the to-do itself, the string, and the index. There's a method built into arrays called for each. So if you know about that, that is one option, but I'm not going to show it now. But we'll get to it, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a couple of sections. Okay, so let's see what happens now. Does it actually work how it's supposed to? Let's do list. Looks good to me. And then quit. So now let's implement new. So I can make a new to-do. We'll just add in another conditional, a check. We'll do an else if input is equal to new. Just like that. What we're going to do is prompt the user again, and this time ask them for their new to-do. So I'll use const because we're only going to ask them one time, right? The reason I used let here for input is that we're reassigning input over and over and over. So I'll use const. So const new to-do probably is what I would call this, or new text or something. Yeah, new to-do equals prompt. And we'll do something like, okay, what is the new to-do? And then we'll take that result, which will be a string, and we'll just add that on to the to-dos array. Now, how do we do that? We use push. That's one option. To-dos.push new to-do. And then I like to provide some basic feedback. So let's do a simple console.log. On the solution, if I type new, I enter new to-do. Okay, it says blah, blah, blah added to list. So let's do that. Let's print that out. String template literal. New to-do. Added to the list, just like that. Okay, let's see if it works. I'll refresh the page. Let's do a new. Okay, what is the new to do? How about walk the dog? Walk the dog added to the list. Now let's actually type list. And there it is. Okay, let's do one more. Walk the cats. Show them all with list. Walk the cats is there. Okay, so now all we have left is delete. So we'll just do another else if input equals delete. Now, this is the most annoying one to do because, first of all, we need to ask, what are you trying to delete? So we'll use prompt. We'll call this index prompt. Okay, what is the index, or enter an index? Enter an index to delete. Great, let's just make sure we see that. And then I'm going to console.log the index. Okay, so I'll refresh the page. Let me quit, refresh. Let's list, and then let's do a delete. Make sure we see, okay, we do. Enter an index to delete. If I enter 1, okay, it looks good. Looks like that's working for us. We see 1 here. So now we need to take that index and somehow remove the element at that index. How do we do that? Well, we use the splice method. That's one option. So just to recap splice, let me get out of here. If I have an array, like what we have to-dos, if I do a splice, it works to, remove a section of an array. So if I do something like splice, from index of, well, let me add on to to-dos a bit. To-dos, or maybe I'll just do numbers. Const nums equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I do nums.splice, then I specify a starting index, like index of 2, how about? And then a number to delete. Let's say I want to delete 1. What happens? Well, let's look at nums. I just deleted element 3, which is index of 2. It's kind of confusing, right? But 0, 1, 2. And I just deleted 1 item. So that's basically what we want to do. But this, the initial index that we're starting to delete at, is not going to be 2, at least not every time hard-coded. It's going to be whatever the user enters. So we're going to splice, do it right here, to-dos dot splice from the user's index and only for 1 element. Now, we are trusting that the user enters a valid index, right? Which is fine at this point. We haven't talked about, handling errors, because potentially there could be an error, especially if the user enters something that's not a number. We'll just trust that a user can do it. And then let's console.log something different instead. This will actually give us the results that comes back, right? Inside of an array. If you recall, you can see right here when I call splice, it gave me back this array with the element that was deleted. So if I wanted to, I could save that deleted stuff, or just deleted, equals to-dos.splice. Okay, and then I'll console.log something like, okay, deleted, and then we could actually add in the thing that was just deleted. Now that's an array, so I'll do index of 0. Now you don't have to do this, right? This is above and beyond, but let me just demonstrate it first. So let me add something new. Well, let's not do something dumb. How about cook dinner? List. Okay, index of 2. Let's try deleting it. Or let's actually do clean litter box, index of 1. So I'm going to enter 1. It says, okay, deleted clean litter box. Now let's list. And it actually was removed. We can see here, the array has now shrunk. Just to recap what's happening here, right? We're asking for an index. Now, again, a user could enter something that is invalid. Let's see what happens there. Let's try and delete with a string index. And, oh, look at that. Deleted collect chicken eggs. So here's what's going on. Just as a demo, I've got an array of strings. And if we, splice from index of 1 to 1, right, we remove B. But if I have a string in here, well, first of all, if it's a string containing a number, it will, try and convert it to a number. And so that still works. But if it's a string like this, it just defaults to 0, index of 0. So that could be problematic. If we want to, I guess I can show this. We can add an extra step in here where we can attempt to turn this string, it's always a string from prompt, turn that into a number with parse int. Like this, parse int of index. Now, honestly, I'm embarrassed. I can't remember if we've covered it yet or not. If not, parse int, again, it takes a string and it returns, if I can just get out of here, parse int, like that, a string, like 23, it gives us the actual number 23. But if we do something like that, we'll get not a number. Okay, so basically what we want to do now is check if we got not a number, we're not going to try and delete something. That means you entered a string, or, well, they always entered a string, but you entered letters or something that does not contain a valid integer. So unfortunately, checking to see if something's not a number is actually kind of complicated. It's not hard, but we just haven't talked about it. But there's a method called number dot, is not a number. And then if we pass something in, like a number like this, we actually get false. But if I pass in not a number, we get true. So again, it's kind of weird. But what we can do is check to see when you parse that int on that index. So let's call that, const. Let's go with, this will be, how about string? What should we call this? Index string str. And then this will be const index equals parse int of that index string. So we'll get the string version from a user. Actually what I would probably rather do, I'm sorry for being a bit scatterbrained here, is just do it in one go. Ask them and then immediately parse int on their input. All right, so now we have index and we're just going to check if number dot is not a number of index. So if it is not a number, I think I'll actually reverse it or negate it and just put this code inside. So if the index that you entered when we converted it to an actual number, if we did not get not a number, meaning it's valid, we will try and delete from your to-do. Otherwise, I'll do something like maybe unknown index, and we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so a bit of a tangent, more complicated than I wanted to make it. But now, hopefully, if a user enters an invalid index, let's see actually if it works, of course. So let's add a new to-do, blah, blah. Here's another new one, boo, boo, and then list them. And let's delete blah, blah, index of 2. So delete, and then 2. Okay, let's list them, and it's gone. But now if I try and delete something like this, unknown index. Great, and hopefully it didn't delete anything. Well, I just typed delete again. I meant to type list. Let's do another invalid index. How about, something else you could do is add a check-in to make sure the index was a valid index in the array. Because what happens if I enter, 88? Deleted undefined. So we didn't actually delete anything. So that's something you could consider adding in. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to stop here. Let's get out of this. Whoops, Q. There we are. We quit the app and we are done. All right, so this is definitely the longest thing we've really written so far. Still not that impressive, I know, but it's a lot of pieces, especially once we talked about, parsing ints and, working with arrays and splice and string template literals and conditionals and a for loop and a while loop. There's a lot going on here. So whether you got this on your own or a small part of it on your own, or you just followed along with me, either way, it's definitely an accomplishment in this course. The one thing I would recommend is making sure that you can walk through this code and explain, what's going on here. What does this mean? Why is there an and? Why 2 not equals? What's going on here? What's I? What's the square brackets, to-do's I? What's splice doing? Anyway, congrats. We've made it through a decent chunk of JavaScript, but as you probably have noticed, we've got an even decenter chunk to go. All right, I'll shut up.